The only guy with a laptop. Trouble. Mayor Artis is probably one of the most uniquely qualified people to be here today. In many ways, I think before the concept of servant leadership was defined or described, Jim was living it. And so, not just to ask for another round of applause for the father of our city and mayor, but all the speakers here today, because I think they've made some great points. One more round of applause for them. My mother wanted me to do something this morning. I need your help. I can barely see you. But I've lived here 26 years now. I was recruited by the hospitals in 1991, and I've actually never been on stage at the theater at the Civic Center. So I want to take a picture of you guys out there. Would you mind waving to my mother, please? She asked me to text her a picture. She's 85. So if I could get the next slide. We've had a great morning together here, and Jan Wright and interbusiness issues, and of course Jonathan, who's standing in for his mom today, just are real thought leaders in our community. But I also recognize the fact that you're here this morning because you place a big priority on making a difference in this community. And my job as the last speaker is to pivot from where we've been this morning and try to wrap this up. And I'd like just to begin from my view in characterizing the elements that I think really drive personal volunteerism, and that is volunteers really find purpose in adversity, and that's usually other people's adversity, and volunteers never take anything for granted, and by making the decision to support something, they think boldly and act locally. And I think that's very, very important because of all the assets we have as human beings, time is the most precious. You know, it's finite. If we could take the next mouse click, if you would. When you choose to volunteer, you give hope to someone or something. And the thing to me about hope that matters most, it means that change is possible. And in a community, especially this one, that matters to an awful lot of people. If I could get the next slide. Now, nobody needs really this particular definition, but it helps me frame the story I want to tell you. Michael Steffen is probably here today. I can't see him. I saw him earlier. He's always well-dressed and well-groomed. And he's the CEO of the Heart of Illinois United Way, and he has been profoundly successful in that position, as I have served on his board of directors before, and I have seen the extraordinary results from their campaign efforts and then their distribution projects and how well they account for the value of services they're purchasing from community organizations. But we were having lunch, and I've kind of turned him on to sushi, which is a very new experience for a very meat and potatoes kind of guy like him. And over lunch, we have really, really meaningful conversations. We usually talk about a few people we don't like, but mostly we talk about the United Way. And we were talking this particular day about how challenging it is for people in need, and even those who are here today who are connecting the supply of services with the demand for services for friends and neighbors and strangers, people who really have come to rely on many of the member agencies, for example, that the United Way supports. It's really challenging for them to get connected to the right place, the right time. So we were imagining on a napkin what we could do, and three things we decided were important conceptually. One, we needed a common place that you could call, a common telephone answering point, much like we use 911 today, which is all hazards. You call this number and we've got a solution for just about every problem. If not, we'll just send everybody we know in emergency services, and one of us will figure it out. And we needed a way to warehouse up-to-date contact information in an organized, searchable database, which up-to-date, that's the real trick, regarding all of the services in the community like rental assistance or access to doctors, or how do I pay my power bill if I don't have any money, or access for the homeless to get medical care. We needed a way to provide the correct referral for battered spouses or kids in trouble. What was the right number to call? Where were they located? Where were they located? When were they open? And it really depended upon where you lived. That was sort of another layer of complexity. And finally, the third thing we thought was absolute was we needed compassionate, thoughtful telecommunicators who, when they take these calls for service, they empathized and were confidential and created rapport and relationships with people so they could learn more about all of the things that they could possibly do to help them. So the decision between these two guys over sushi was we needed a single access point. The way it was done prior to this is all the organizations in town have phone numbers. They're open certain hours of the day. One organization doesn't per se connect to the services another organization might have to help an individual. And we decided one single point of access for all these health and human care services would benefit the communities we served. So that's great. How did we do? So what? We had a great idea. We had 3 requirements for it. How did we do it? Next slide. In the 70s, which I noticed many of you here today don't even know what that means, but back in the year 1970, the Federal Communication Commission had gone ahead and set aside a series of 3-digit numbers for special purposes. And the point of the 3-digit numbers was it was very easy to remember. The most common one you might know of is 911. We wish it was a little less common. But another number I grew up knowing was 411. That was a number you called when you wanted to find out somebody's telephone number. And if you've never heard that said before, you're definitely born in the year 2000 or after. These numbers that the FCC had set aside reserved this touch three numbers. It points to a single call center, and something's at the end of it. Well, 211 was reserved at the time as an information and referral line. There wasn't a lot of body to the expectations of what was on the other end of a 211 center, but it had been set aside. So Michael and I were having lunch, decided we would establish the first ever joint partnership between a little ambulance company and the Heart of Illinois United Way, and we would implement a solution that would provide this single point of access that had up-to-date information for information and referral purposes, and we would do it together. We would leverage our call center, our technicians, and our information technology platform, and then as Julie Louise Dreyfus said, yada, yada, yada. We went live in 2013 in June. To date, that center has answered 19,300 calls, provided 61,000 referrals. The web portal into it has accommodated another 18,800 users with 109,000 page views. Combined, we've touched and connected 38,000 clients or users. We've considered it a success. Next slide. Just a few months ago, Jan Wright, who I visit with frequently because she's a real provocative thought leader, approached us with an idea about being a sponsor for today's events because as a not-for-profit that contributes in the community and is part of the fabric of the community, she thought that was a good fit. I was trying to figure out how we could validate underwriting an event like this. So we conferred with our partners at the United Way after that event, and I suggested to Michael Steffen, if he would buy me sushi, I would have an idea for him. So in this particular, sushi, that's the food for great thought. So in this particular conversation, we were asking, was it possible to leverage anything the United Way was doing, which included its relationship with our call center, to process somehow through the same idea, this centralized repository of health and human care organizations, and really many more dimensions to it, in one place. And so one more final yada, 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 and we have something to talk to you about today. So let's see the next slide. This particular event, this banner, I like that kid, who's ever a kid that is absolutely adorable. You are now able to call 211, or if you're an organization, let's see the next slide. Right here we've added, can you see that? says volunteer opportunities. This is the home page if you access through the web. When you start to drill down into volunteer opportunities, whether you're an organization that needs assistance, PCAPS comes to mind, animal, walking dogs, cleaning cages, all the volunteer activities that go on at our animal welfare shelter. That's an example. So they could list their needs in there. And then if you're a volunteer, depending on where you are, I'm going to get into some screens here in a sec to show you, you could find opportunities to volunteer if you're an animal lover. So let's go one more screen forward, please. When you click on that tab that I just showed you in the upper right, this one comes up. So where you are, if you want to volunteer for something, or in reverse, if you're an agency that wants to list a particular need, and just for the record, it goes through an internal vetting process. We want to make it a qualified volunteer posting. Next slide. Or you can use this particular tab right here, which is on that same screen. I'm just rolling it down to the middle. Go one more screen. This is actually an example, if I take my glasses off, at Methodist, Unity Point Methodist Medical Center, under their general overview section. They have some stuff listed here. Let's go one more screen, we'll go into details. And down here are volunteer opportunities. So we're just now beginning to build this out. My job was to pivot from where we've been to connect you to how we might leverage volunteer capacity for organizations that need them and turn it around the other way, use the power of the volunteers in our community to help them search for and find opportunities that they want to contribute to. Another example, next slide. One of my favorites, Neighborhood House. Once again, the general tab has an overview which details services which includes volunteering there. Next slide. When you dig down into the details page, there's more information on this. So as you keep, and I will admit the UI on this particular piece of software is not the sexiest I've seen, but it's the one we're using, so you'll like it. So when I first stood up, one more slide please, I suggested that if you find purpose in adversity, which I think is the heart of every volunteer, and you take nothing for granted, and that is that when we think others have their problems solved or issues mitigated because somebody else might do it, that's a very false premise. Never take that for granted. And then you think boldly, choose to do something and act locally. I think we all accomplish together what the essence of many conversations before mine aims to do today, and that is to define what the real state of the volunteer is here in Central Illinois. And I think the example with our partnership with the Heart of Illinois United Way, you can find yourself through our new 211 volunteer portal. So I just want to say in the lobby, if you want to play with us, this is a web app, mobile app. The web app's different, but we've got a cool one in the lobby that you can try on your way out. Thank you very much.